The current era of the NBA is pretty weird. Not to sound like an old head here, but the game is softer than ever. These days, you breathe on people and get a flagrant. While in any of the older eras, guys were really out there tackling each other out of the air on the regular. Despite this, it seems like the stars these days need more time off and are also experiencing career-altering injuries more frequently, as well as earlier in their careers. Why is this? To answer the question, we have to look no further than America's own AAU. The Amateur Athletic Union is a youth basketball program that has taken the center stage in top-level American youth basketball in recent years. In a typical AAU schedule, kids will play around 50 to 70 games, which is already high. However, in the highest levels of competition, kids can be playing way more than 100 games per year, with players sometimes playing over 4 games a weekend or even 4 times a day. It's all too common for young athletes during tournament season to be playing for several hours each day between practice and games. This right here can answer a lot about the current era. Yes, rookies are coming into the league better than ever for their age. However, this is only because they're already grinding their bones into dust playing a combined 200 AAU and school games a year. This has led to there being a very high number of top draft picks in the past few years who have looked so promising, yet their careers start off injury-riddled. This happens very frequently when players make the jump from college ball to the NBA. The example that stands out the most is Zion Williamson, who was probably the biggest AAU media megastar of all time. As we all know, Zion is physically massive, and has been massive since he was a kid playing in AAU. Unfortunately, the huge amount of games that Zion had to play since he was a kid, and especially at his size, seems to have taken its toll on Zion's entire body. The guy just can't stay on the court, sadly, only being available to play in around 40% of his games up until this point. We're not the only ones who feel this way about AAU. Steve Kerr was a vocal critic of the AAU system, especially for basketball, not only talking about the insane amount of games, but also that the AAU structure doesn't really teach players how to win. It's very common for kids to bounce around between teams and programs, and this is really hurting the identity of it all. Now more than ever, kids are prospected early on, and the pressure of prospect ranking and constant game time is definitely not healthy for young athletes. The trend has already been running its course. However, in the most recent years, it's really gotten worse, and we might just have a large number of very talented individuals that can't stay on the court for the upcoming era. Something we are keeping an eye on is the steady stream of talent coming out of the European leagues. The hoops culture in Europe is much different than the AAU grind, but tons of quality players are still produced and drafted each year.
Aside from Zion, there are plenty of other NBA stars who've entered into the AAU system only to find themselves constantly battling off injuries. And one of those players is actually Zion's teammate Brandon Ingram, who started his AAU journey after the family had moved to Kinston, North Carolina, where Ingram's dad, who was a semi-professional basketball player at the time, had started playing with Jerry Stackhouse. The two built up a friendship until Jerry's retirement, when he shifted into coaching his own AAU team, the Stackhouse Elite, which was ultimately BI's first AAU team going into the 8th grade. He's also been on record around this time stating how being around Jerry Stackhouse really took his game to another level, so he continued to develop in AAU throughout his time in high school, while also trying to balance his role on his own high school team, which often meant playing basketball year-round for multiple hours a day. Now, all of this hard work did pay off, as he was catching a lot of eyes from national scouts at the age of 16, thanks in part to his time at the Stackhouse Elite. But now fast forward to his time in the NBA, and all of that basketball may now be starting to finally take its toll, as ever since joining the Pelicans, he's played less and less games year over year. And with Zion's previously mentioned struggles, this has resulted in the duo only playing a total of 93 out of the 283 possible games, which most likely isn't what David Griffin and the head office had in mind when building this team. But there is another player who's usually already linked to BI for similar looks, but now have even more in common with how much they've been sitting out as of late. And that player is Kevin Durant, who's only had one season where he managed to play 70 or more games since winning his MVP award almost a decade ago in 2014, even playing in less total games than AD since 2019. Now, all of this could be chalked up to the fact that KD has been involved with many AAU teams since the age of 9, winning his first AAU championship and MVP only 7 years later while averaging 26 and 12. As everyone knows, KD is and always has been a hooper, You can take him out of AAU, and he still probably would have spent hours at some local court putting in work. So it's hard to really point the finger at AAU and instead just chalk it up to a person who is willing to put their body on the line for the love of the game, which at some point might be more than we can say for Zion, as for most of the time he's usually on the bench looking very detached, and even feuding with the Pelicans last year before they ultimately turned it around after the All-Star break, which seemingly gave Zion a little more motivation, but it seems like that won't be enough, as the damage done to Zion at this point might be beyond repair. And the sad part about it is, there is already an existing player who might just be Zion's prototype, Greg Oden, who unfortunately wasn't able to reach his full potential after being the first overall pick in 2007, already setting parallels between him and Zion, with another one being their rookie season, in which Oden missed the entirety of, but Zion was able to make a return for 24 games. But their most telling similarity to me at this point is the fact that both of them saw a career high in games in their sophomore season, with both players playing exactly 61 games each. Now, Greg would go on to miss the next 3 years straight, with his total of NBA games played being 105. And at the moment, Zion isn't too far ahead with 114. But the reason for both of these correlations might be because of the main similarity that no one is talking about in their AAU journeys, both winning multiple AAU championships, and it was through these achievements that both were seen as the best high school players in their respective generations, both going on to have extremely successful college careers before coming to the NBA, and having all of that wear and tear finally catch up to you. We look at Greg Oden's story as a sad cautionary tale of how injuries can destroy a player's NBA career. And maybe AAU is one of the largest contributing factors that might need to be reined in before we lose more players like Greg Oden and Zion Williamson. But let us know in the comments what you think is causing all of these injuries in the modern era. And while you're there, you might as well slap a like on the video and hit the subscribe button. It would really mean a lot. And we'll see you next Monday.